My name was June Orwell. My date of birth was the 22nd of November 1939. Obviously I was born right at the beginning of the war. All my mother's family lived in the East End of London in Petticoat Lane. My mother, to be fair, when I was very young, I don't know what really she did, but she always worked in some form of factory or another. She was one of 3 children, and both her sisters, one sister definitely was in dressmaking, and I'm not sure what the elder sister did. But my mother lost her father when she was only 13 years of age. Anyway, then she met my father. He was in the army, so because of the war. So then my mother was evacuated. She was bombed twice from Brunswick buildings in Petticoat Lane. So all the possessions were lost. She went with her sister, who also had a son, and we went to Oxford first, and my mum was a postmistress. And then we moved to Leeds, and my mother worked in a munitions factory. In the meantime, I was living in a village called Clayton, near Doncaster. Towards the end of the war, I came back to the East End with her, and I can remember there used to be this big company there called the Houndsditch Warehouse. And I can remember being there and I could hear the sirens going. So I think it was towards the end of the war when we must have come back. And I remember we ran for a shelter. I don't remember a lot, but I do remember we lived in these tenement block of flats in Petticoat Lane. And you could go on the roof, and apparently it was built, there used to be a monastery there. And I can remember standing on top of this roof with the railings and looking out, and it was as if the whole of London was on fire. And we were told afterwards that we didn't get bombed, or we didn't get affected because of the holy ground that we were on. Anyway, we lived there. As I say, it was a tenement block. There was 4 people to a landing, and there was 2 rooms. Each person had 2 rooms. They shared 1 kitchen. 2 of the flats had cookers in their sitting rooms. The other 2 had their cookers on the landing in the kitchen. The sinks were in the kitchen, obviously, on the landing, and 2 toilets on the landing. In the grounds of the flats, there was a baths where you could have your bath. And I can remember we used to go in there and pay our money. I can't remember how much it was, but used to say, "Can we have more hot water in number 6, please?" So we used to do that. I can remember the coalman coming with carrying the big heavy sacks of coal up, because there was no lifts. We were on the 4th floor. And in our sitting rooms, in the front room, there was like a chest, and you pulled the wooden chest down and all the coal would go into that. I can remember my mum ironing, and it was all plugged into the light with the iron. It's amazing. I can remember my dad having a handbag store down Petticoat Lane. So my mother used to help him. He used to sell handbags. He was one of the first people to sell leather handbags. So they were quite expensive. So he enjoyed that. But my dad was never very healthy because he had a problem with his lung. And eventually later on in life, he had to have the lung removed. And then we moved, as I say, when I was getting to 11. And we moved to Collingwood House in Bethnal Green. And that's when Daddy started working in an office. He worked for tea merchants. And Mummy, in the meantime, Mummy had worked for family tailors, making men's trousers. And she was always very lucky. She'd get my brother's trousers. She was always happy about that. So I remember her doing that, because I can remember I had to go and pick up my brother from the nursery when I finished school. I went to school in Aldgate, and from school I'd go and pick him up and bring him home. I was 11 when we moved, and obviously in the flats, they were new flats, so it was amazing. We had bathrooms, which was incredible for us. And in the particular block we lived in, there was lots of young children my age. And a lot of these people had already been going to Brady because they went to school around the area that my mother lives in now, in Hanbury Street. and they lived there and they went to school there. So they started going to Brady at a much younger age. So they told me to come along. So I was 11 when we went to Brady. I used to go from school. I used to go in and they'd have tea for younger people. I can remember the lady who looked after that was Mrs. Green. I can remember that. And that's how I started. My parents thought it was a very, very good idea because we had a purpose. It gave us an interest, it kept us off the streets, and they knew where we were. And because a lot of the people lived in our flats, we always had somebody to come home with, so we weren't on our own. In my day, as I got a bit older and I came out of the junior, which is Mrs. Green was always the club leader, it was a lady called Betty Benjamin. Miss Benjamin, we called her. We never called her Betty, but Miss Benjamin. And she was the club leader. Amazing, amazing lady. Absolutely lovely lady. She was single at the time, and it was lovely to hear she got married later in life. She just was a very warm person. She didn't come from the East End. I never did know where she came from, but I think she was very well educated, and she just had a lot of compassion. And also at the time, there was a lady called Miss Moses, who was the overall leader of the club. There was a hostel in the club, and the young girls would go live in the hostel. And Miss Moses, she was the head one, that's right. And she would run the hostel. And I think she became a Justice of the Peace. I think she was even a mayoress. That was very special. And then we had lots of different managers in the club in regards to the different activities that we joined in. I was very interested in dramatics. So I was in the class with Miss Berman. And it was very strange that my dad loved amateur dramatics. And he, years before, was in Miss Berman's class. And she was really pleased when I joined. I was never as good as my dad, because my dad, obviously he wasn't Jewish, and he was the only non-Jewish person. There used to be a theatre in Commercial Road called the Grand Palais, and he played the part of an old Jewish man, and everybody thought he was Jewish. So Miss Berman thought, I was coming of good stock, but she was really sweet, and she was very nice. Another very genteel lady, very genteel lady. I don't know where she came from, but very nice. And we put on lots of different productions, and it was good. I thoroughly enjoyed that. So I concentrated on the dramatics. We used to do sports. We used to go to Victoria Park, and we used to take part in, I liked long jump, and we used to go for competitions representing the club. I played netball for the club. We used to have Keep Fit in the club. So we would have, and I can remember we had displays, and the parents would come, and we'd be there with our little navy knickers and tops and doing the displays. And they were very good. And of course, we enjoyed the socials. We used to enjoy the socials. And I know eventually I was on the committee. I was one of the people who'd go and buy our records for the dance on Friday night when the boys used to come for our socials. Oh, Skeet. We went to Skeet. I must have been about 14, 15 when I went to Skeet. And it was lovely. We always used to meet at Whitechapel Station, a whole group of people, and we'd go to Knockholt Station, and we would walk over the fields, cross country to get to Skeet House. It was absolutely idyllic. It was something that you can imagine where we lived in the East End. It was lovely to see the open fields. The house was amazing. There was so much going on. There used to be tennis courts. We used to play everything. The boys used to camp in the fields. And when we went, changed over the years, but we used to help in the kitchen. We used to peel the potatoes. And it was a good grounding. We learnt things, how to do things, and you're part of belonging. And that was amazing. We were all together as a group, and it was great. It was amazing, and it was an amazing bond. But Skeet was incredible. But I did go abroad with them to Switzerland, which was amazing. The first time I'd ever been abroad on the train. We went on the train. So that was lovely. Lake Lugano, I think we went there. That was lovely. So that was a nice trip. My memorable experience of the club, I think it's friendship. That is, it's priceless because I still personally meet up with people who I went to the club with at age 11, and we're still friends. And you can't put a price on that. And I think because at the time, again, we all came from the East End, not many people, we didn't have very much money. And we shared things, we borrowed each other's clothes if we were going out, shoes if we were the same size, which was a natural thing to do. It's so hard for me to describe that to my children or my grandchildren, how we grew up in that club. I think without the club, it would have been very sad for me not to have had that experience. I think it's very sad that there aren't any youth clubs, or not many youth clubs going at the moment. I don't know, I'm talking about the East End, that's all I know. There may be, I think there's some boxing clubs still going, but I think now it'd be very hard for the children to get back into that mentality of the youth clubs because they wouldn't have known anything. Now it's all changed because everything is technical now. Everybody's on their phones and computers. And I think the children of today have missed out so much by not joining a youth club. And that is very sad for deprived children. There is no places that they can go to. Sometimes they have after school clubs, but I don't think there's enough. And I think it all boils down to money. And this is what it's all about. And also volunteers who will help. Because in our day, I'm sure they were all volunteers, the managers who came to help. And that isn't there anymore. Well, they've missed out on the friendship. They've missed out on doing things together as a group, going on holidays, going to a place like Skeet, which is an amazing experience in our lives. You know, but now children, there's so much more money around that people have got money to do things we didn't. Our pleasure when we left our youth club, left the Brady, of the night, we used to go along Whitechapel and have a portion of chips and walk along Whitechapel on the way home. And that was, to us, that was so special, costing very little. Yeah, we definitely had a rich life by the people we met and the friendships that we made, that in my case are still going today.